Okay, so Modern Horizons 2 changed a lot, right? Like, we got a lot of cards from that set, and we had a lot of changes in terms of how we interact with the format, what we're interacting with, and all that stuff. But I think we're sleeping on some stuff in Kamigawa, and I'm kind of upset that I didn't learn about this card earlier. Like, it's so hidden. But let's go through it, right? We're gonna take a journey through what I think might actually be a replacement for Prismatic Ending in Modern. I'm Shafa, aka That Mill Guy. Let's talk about some Neon Dynasty rares. So first and foremost, let's start our journey off at the top with Modern Horizons 2. Being printed earlier this year, the set changed a lot, as I mentioned, a lot of new staples, and in a way has made Modern feel like it's rotating. So with that in mind, we see the printing of a very, very powerful uncommon in Prismatic Ending, seen as a essential replacement for Path to Exile and a lot of other removal spells that could be played in this slot, just because it gets rid of anything, any non-land permanent you can think of with mana value less than or equal to the number of colors spent to it. So for 1 mana, you're killing a 1 CMC permanent. For 2 mana and 2 colors, you're killing a 2 CMC permanent, so on and so forth. So it's always going to be on rate, but the problem is it's sorcery speed, and you have to be playing multiple colors, which is why you are going to be seeing this played in multicolor decks, which we'll go into. But regardless of that restriction, it's the third most played spell in the format. In terms of top cards played overall, I guess it's fifth in this list too, right? So the card is very, very good in terms of what it does. It's able to hit artifacts, creatures, enchantments, and planeswalkers. Anything that a control deck or a white player in general could have a problem with on the board, Prismatic Ending is going to deal with. Kind of looking at the modern metagame, the decks that we're primarily going to see this are the hyper-interactive strategies. First and foremost, we have the Blink deck that is going to be taking advantage of this card because, while this is in many ways a 4 to 5 color deck, it doesn't really have a way to create black, although you can with Abundant Growth, so you can create 5 colors of mana to get the 5 CMC permanents. Not that there are many out there. You could be killing Yorians and Teferi 5s, but again, this deck is going to be able to take advantage of the X cost, the converge mechanic on Prismatic Ending to the best of its ability, which is why it's playing it as its primary source of removal, on top of course, something like Solitude, which we'll see in the blue-white control list that, right here, playing the 4 Prismatic Endings as a way to create removal to go around the Chalices of the Voids that they might have on the battlefield, complemented with Solitudes to get rid of anything beyond that, such as problematic creatures. So again, Prismatic Ending being this primary staple in the white-based strategies, especially decks that can take advantage of its multicolors, and especially in a deck like this, you're seeing the fact that this deck is playing something like Rogran Triome, Steam Vents, to even just cast a card like this. There's no real other reason for this card to play those cards. I mean, of course, there's the Fire and Ice, but let's be honest, a Rogran Triome is really here for the Prismatic Ending. Staple modern card. But then we have Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. There's a lot of cards coming out of this set. It's a pretty powerful set for the Eternal formats. Heck, even for Standard, there's a lot of Pioneer cards, a lot of Modern cards, heck, even a lot of Legacy cards that people are talking about out of this set. So a lot of people are really excited for the return to one of the classic OG sets of Modern, where we see, some of the older cards, like Boseiju from what it was before. It was Boseiju who shelters all, and now it's Boseiju who endures, now being a green land. This is probably going to be the card that many people think is the face of the most powerful card out of this set. And rightfully so, especially in Legacy. This is going to be in the land strategies, anything playing, Ren 6 not legal in Legacy, but anything that's recurring lands and able to use this ability to the max, uncounterable source of hate towards you. Weird way to say it, but the land strategies are generally graveyard based in Legacy, so having the ability to destroy those graveyard hate spells and artifacts enchantments, that's uncounterable, fantastic. Obviously in Modern, people are talking about this in conjunction with Ren 6, and obviously alongside decks like Primeval Titan, the Primetime decks, where you do actually have legendary spells in Azusa, so this could actually be costing 1. Regardless, Boseiju is going to be that frontline face, but again, we're here to talk about a card that I think people aren't recognizing, and I think could be an actual replacement in some cases, or at least a split with Prismatic Ending to be the new contender of the best white removal in the format. So let's go through it. In terms of the old Kamigawa, we see various cycles. right? And some of these cycles actually in many ways have returned in the current Kamigawa. Now, the old Kamigawa block was a 3-block set, to my knowledge. It was Kamigawa and then Betrayer as a Kamigawa. Maybe there was another one, maybe not. I don't know. Regardless, you can see how much I'm researched this. Regardless, there's a lot of sets. So there's a lot of lore and fluidity between some of the cards and how they are portrayed. So one of the more common ones we see are the legendary dragons in the original Kamigawa set, or so Champions of Kamigawa. We see Ryusei, the Fallen Star, so the legendary dragon. And then in this one, we see Atsushi, the Blazing Sky, being like, thousands of years later, hundreds of years later. We're obviously going to see new legendary dragons. So this cycle returns, legendary dragons. Next up, we see this cycle of pitch spells, I guess is the way to put it. So we have the Shoal cycle in Betrayers of Kamigawa, and this is a cycle where you could pay X and some colors, or you could remove another green card from your hand to essentially be the X. The CMC of that card would be X for this. Noticing Shoal you primarily see in the Neo brand decks as a way to pitch giant Autochrom worms to gain life and then to keep drawing spells through Gristle brand. And that's where you primarily see Nursing Shoal. And so they actually have an analog to this. Just like the dragons, they did create a pitch cycle. Instead of making them free, though, they did make them cost mana. March of the Otherworldly Light. Now read this. Read this for me. 1 white and X. Prismatic Ending. Instant speed. A little bit better than a Prismatic Ending. As additional cost to cast this spell, you may exile any number of white cards from your hand. This spell costs 2 less to cast for each white card exiled this way. Exile target artifact, creature, or enchantment with mana value X or less. So, I know what you're thinking. You're not seeing non-land. You're not seeing Planeswalker on there. Okay, there you go. So, I'm not saying this is necessarily a replacement for replacement for Prismatic Ending in all decks. Although some creature-based strategies that can actually attack into Planeswalkers, maybe you don't really care about that. Because this gets every other type that Prismatic Ending would get at instant speed. And for 1 mana potential, you could pitch some of your white cards in hand to grow this, to kill a Prime Time, a 5 CMC permanent, a 7 CMC permanent, whatever it might be. You could pitch and pay a bunch of mana to actually kill higher CMC stuff, whereas Prismatic Ending can only kill a maximum of 5 CMC permanents. Magic does not have 6 colors, 7 colors, 8 colors. It cannot kill those high CMC stuff. March of the Otherworldly Light can. And that's why I think this card, I'm really surprised no one's talking about this. I think this could actually be a card that splits with Prismatic Ending, if not replace in some strategies. Now in the Blink strategies, again, I don't think it replaces that. But again, the big downside being that it doesn't hit the Planeswalkers. So that's going to be the big downside there. I think in terms of the control decks and the Blink decks, I think they'll still want Prismatic Ending, although I think they will be testing March of the Otherworldly Light, because they do have other ways to deal with a permanent like this. They can attack into it, they can counter it. Although Ren 6 does come down early, they're probably countering stuff like Teferi Time Raveler. But again, I think March of the Otherworldly Light, especially for us mill players here, just kind of taking aside from the modern, I think this card is actually technically better than Prismatic Ending for us. I'm not going to lie here, there's not a lot of Planeswalkers that we necessarily care about. Teferi Time Raveler is a problem, and you might want Prismatic Ending to deal with that. But in a large sense, instant speed is kind of crazy. Another downside I do want to acknowledge, though, is the fact that this is essentially right down on the X cost. So because of the converge mechanic on Prismatic Ending, if you pay 1 white for it, you are able to kill the 1 CMC permanent. Unfortunately for this, you have to pay 2 to kill a 1. You have to pay 3 to kill a 2, right? You see what I mean? So it says mana value X or less, not the color spent for it. So there is that downside. You are technically down on rate, which is why I don't think it's a direct replacement. And I think Prismatic Ending in a lot of ways still has that upside. But again, I think being instant speed does a lot for this card. I honestly think being instant speed and the fact that you can pitch cards to it does a lot for this card. So I would really like to see modern players test this out, mill players test this out. Maybe not, again, as a direct replacement, but as a split, just because it has the ability to be instant speed and you can pitch other colors of mana into it. I can still kill 2 CMC permanents by paying white, colorless, because it's just an X cost. It's not related to the colors like Prismatic Ending is. So that's where I'm going to leave off the discussion here. I really just wanted to bring bring to light this card and bring some attention to this card to see what other Modern players and Mill players think about a card like this out of Kamigawa. There's already a lot of heavy hitters out of this set, but you gotta let me know what you think. Is this worth it? Am I going a little bit crazy here? I don't know. I think there's something to this card, and I'd like to hear your thoughts down below. Let me know what you think. But we're gonna leave off the video there, and hopefully I can see this across the table for me to see how good it is. Remember that even the impossible is possible. And as we ponder that thought, I hope you'll join me next time as we take a glimpse into the unthinkable.